Tech by Tips.
Hello and welcome to another Tech by Tips video. Today's video comes from another video request. This is a relatively recent one, but I wanted to cover this because I know a lot of people are into AI and they really liked that video that I posted on how to train realistic human LoRa's using Kohya SS. So this request comes from Pastel with a bunch of L's, and it says, could you possibly do a video on how to pause and resume on Kohya, cause there are 0 guides and 0 videos on it, and it's very confusing when it resumes the epoch number but not the steps, even though the steps are in the train state JSON file. You'd be the first person on earth to make a guide for it. Alright, so we're gonna cover this request, but I'm gonna do it in a way where I'm gonna cover 3 scenarios. The first scenario is the one that he's talking about, where people train based on the last epoch that they completed. And then I'm going to talk about what this person is talking about here, which is resuming the training using the train state JSON file, which contains the last step that you actually ran through your process. So that's basically, if for some reason your training gets stopped, you can resume at that moment where you were training instead of resuming at the last epoch. So that's a scenario number 2. And then scenario number 3 is going to be using also the train state JSON file, but we're going to be using that only based on completing a training. So that's going to be the 3 different scenarios that we're going to cover here. Hopefully that's going to be enough, not only for this person, but for other people that are interested in continuing their training of a LoRa if they feel, for example, that it wasn't enough. So let me close this and let's go to the video. First of all, I'm going to show you what I'm going to be using in this video for that. The first thing is, if I'm going into my image folder here, I am going to create a LoRa of Ryuko Matoi. I don't know if you're familiar with it. It's a character from the series, the anime series Kill la Kill. So we can go here, we can look at one of the images, for example, and this is the character that I'm talking about. So we're going to be creating an anime character of this character that we have here. Now, if you can see, I have very small amount of images, and this is something that I wanted to do on purpose. Remember, in my last video, I told you, you need to get a good amount of images to make it easier for you to train your LoRa. This is like really low. It's only 22 images, and you'll see the results of that. Since I have so few images, I am going to do 30 training steps for each image. So then I can get my learning a little bit better, so I don't have to train for many epochs to get something that is usable. So I'm going to show you the problem with training with very few images, and one of the ways that you have to kind of fix that problem is increasing the amount of steps. You can do it on the GUI here when you're setting your data set, or you can just come here and change the number. And I'm gonna say that the trigger word is gonna be Ryuko Matoi and the class is a girl. And then I'm gonna show you what I did for training to give you the idea of the first scenario. So if we go into the model folder, we're gonna come here and you're gonna see that I have Ryuko Matoi without a number, and then it just has the epoch number, and it trained about 20 epochs for me in this case. So this was the last epoch, and then I did a -2, which was a continuation of that training based on this last epoch that I got from my first training session, and that's what I'm gonna be explaining now. But I want to show you the results. So let's go into the samples. In the samples here, the prompt that I put in my parameters to test the LoRa is the following. It says, Ryuko Matoi with the 3 parentheses. That means I really want Ryuko Matoi because this is my trigger word. And then I said it's a slim girl with a perfect face, perfect eyes, perfect anatomy, perfect hands. And again, 3 parentheses, I want anime here. I don't want it realistic or a painting or anything like that. And then the negative prompt is things I don't want. So I don't want a deformed face, I don't want deformed eyes, deformed limbs, extra arms, extra legs, extra fingers, something that looks morbid, or a deformed body. And I said, okay, give me a 512 by 512 image. We're going to be doing 27 steps, and we're going to be using the L of 7, which the L in this translates to the config. So the config is 7. Why? Because I'm using a very specific model. It's a pre-trained model that you can get for free from Civit AI. It's a model by one person that I think does great and shares with the community a lot of good checkpoints. So that's it. So this is my prompt, and this is the results that I got. So if you can see the first ever attempt at creating a LoRA, let me get the image. It wasn't really very anime-ish style. It's kind of a little bit realistic. It has nothing to do with Ryuko. So you see, it's not enough training, right? So then if we keep going, we see that it kind of slowly starts to grab concepts from Ryuko. Like, for example, here you can see that the background is similar to the background in some of the images that I provided for the training, but she still doesn't look like Ryuko. So we needed to continue training here. At least in here, we're looking something like a uniform, but it's not a school uniform. So it's still making progress. Here, the face starts looking like Ryuko. It doesn't have the red bang here, but the hair and the face is definitely looking more like her. So you can see that the progress is slowly happening. In here, you can see that she has a similar background, but then it confused the scissor with like the hand of a person. And she's wearing like a swimsuit or something. So it's slowly getting better. And in here, the face now is pretty standard. There comes a point where we get something kind of similar to Ryuko. So if we go into this one, which is epoch 17, then you can see kind of the uniform. You see the eye of the scissor here. And the face and everything is good. It doesn't have the red bang, but it looks like Ryuko. So we can see that the progress is happening. But when this training ends, which is about here, we're still having issues where it's not getting Ryuko right. So then I said, okay, I need to continue training this LoRA because this LoRA is not working. I have too few images and I want to get something more similar to her. And that's when I started the second, which is the resuming, based on the last epoch that I generated for my first training session. And then it continued on where I was. So if you see very fast, I have something that looks like Ryuko, and now it just keeps adding on to it. So now she has a red bang a little bit here. And if we continue going, there's a few cases where I have a very decent Ryuko, like this one. So by epoch 7 of the second training session, it's all right. It's something that looks like what I want. And I would say probably the best epoch that I got here is this one here, which is epoch 13 of the second training session, or epoch 15 of the second training session, where you can actually see Ryuko, even with the background and everything here. And then the other one is basically Ryuko, but dressed differently. So the training was successful. It continued where I left off. And now I'm going to explain how do you get the first scenario going in Kohya SS. So when you're training, in your model folder, it's going to be dropping your safe tensor files. These are your epochs. So when you finish your first training session, if you're doing more than one epoch, you're going to look for the one that doesn't have a number. That's going to be the last epoch of your training. If you're only training one epoch, then that's all you're going to see. But in my case, you can see that I had a bunch of different epochs. So I'm going to make sure that this file here that has the name that I gave to my LoRa.safetensors is there. Now, we're going to go back to our Kohya SS. We're going to be in the LoRa training section, and then we're going to make some changes here. The first thing that I want to highlight here is you go into the model, and in here, I am using the model, the checkpoint. I'm using the checkpoint that I mentioned. I highly recommend you to check out Stable Yogi's checkpoints in Civit AI because they are really good. He's constantly putting good stuff out there. I'm using version 5 of Babes by Stable Yogi. This is a pony, so it's SDXL, but it's like really ramped up to be more flexible. I would say more versatile, right? So it kind of breaks the restrictions that you get on the base SDXL. So if you come down here, you can download it for free. Obviously, he has a link to his Patreon here. He has pro versions of his checkpoints that you can get from Patreon, but you can come down here, you can see stuff that people have created. And it, you know, if you're into realism, His realistic ones are great, but they are also good for anime and drawing some paintings and stuff like that. So you can see you can do anything you want with those checkpoints. There's other ones. You can do Juggernaut, and there's Dream Booth, I think is the name of the other one. There's a lot of good ones in Civit AI, but I would say, if you want flexibility, the Stable Yogi ones are very good. Just check it out. So that's what I'm using. That's the checkpoint or the model that I'm using to train. And then my output or the name of my LoRA is going to be Ryuko Matoi. That's why you saw that in the file. So Ryuko Matoi, and I put where I'm going to put all that stuff. It's going to be in this folder here. And it automatically detects that this is SDXL because this model is basically SDXL, but made more powerful. And I wanted to save my file as a safe tensors file. And since I have an RTX 5090, I'm going to be training using the Precision BF16. So that's what I had here for the model. Now if we scroll down a little bit to the parameters section, this is very important. The first thing that I want to do is show you how do I get my samples generated. So you go here where it says samples, and then here's where you create your prompt. And then you basically here say, I don't want to sample by steps, I want to sample by epochs. So I said every epoch create a sample, and I say I like Euler A as a sampler. And then here I provided my prompt, the same prompt that you saw here, because this saves this into a file here to use it later. So this is where you put your prompt. The first part here before the N is the positive, after the N is the negative, and then the W and H is the size of the image, the L is the config, and the S is the amount of steps. So that's how you do that. Then we go into the steps. So we're going to go into the basic parameters here. And normally when you're training, you set up your epochs, how many, save how many epochs and whatever, all that stuff, right? And you come down here and you make sure that you're setting up your resolution, and you're also setting up your network. Since I'm training for an anime, I brought it down to 64 and 32. Normally I was training 128, 64 for realistic ones. So this is the basic stuff that you want. But if you are going to be training a continuation of a training that you completed based on the save tensor file, then you need to come here where it says network weights, and it tells you that's a path to an existing LoRA network weights to resume the training from. So you select here the button, and then you come here in the window and you select, like I said, the last epoch from that first training, which is ryukomatoi.savetensors. Alright, so now we have that. It's gonna load everything from that last epoch and continue from there. But it's just gonna be like starting from scratch from that epoch. Now, an important thing to say here, since I already have my previous epoch here, I need to make sure that in the model I rename this to something like that. I already did version 2, right? So now I'm going to put /3 to identify that this is the third attempt at training or the third continuation of training. Once I have that here, then that's it for the basic. And if in the first scenario, that's all that you need. You just make sure that in your basic, you make a reference to the last successfully completed epoch file, and it's going to load from there, and then from that epoch, it's going to continue the training. So then you just basically click on start training, and then it's going to do that for you. It's going to continue training from that moment like you saw happen in my case. Now let me clear this up, and we're going to set this up again, but using another way of training. Alright, I put all the old images in another folder here so that it doesn't bother us. And there's something here very important that I want to highlight. If you remember the comment said, alright, let's use a train state JSON file to continue where we left it when we were training. But when I was doing my training before, if you see, I do not have a single train state JSON file. Why is that? Because I did not have it configured to save all those steps while I'm training. So we need to fix that so that we can go to the second scenario and the third scenario. So I am going to delete all of this. I don't need any of those epochs that I generated previously. I want to make sure that I'm clean here. Let me just clear the logs also. And there we go. We just have our images. And then here we don't have anything else. In order to generate that train state JSON file, then we're going to set this up this way. Let's go back because this is going to assume that we're going to be doing our first training for this LoRA. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to the name of my first attempt at training. So that's Ryoko Matoi. And SDXL, Safe Tensor, BF16 in my case. If you have another graphics card, probably FP16. And I'm using Babes by Stable Yogi version 5. So all this is looking good. If we go into the parameters, we're going to make sure that I don't have anything here because this is going to be the first time that I'm attempting to train. So I clear that up. Let me save this. And the rest is just basically good. I don't have to do anything here. So where was the problem that was not saving that train_state JSON file? That's in the advanced section here. You have to scroll down a little bit and then you will see somewhere in here that it says save training state, including optimizer states, etc. when saving model. And you have another one here that says save training state, including optimizer states on train end. What is the difference? The first one is scenario number 2, where I said that I want to immediately after I complete a step save that information so that I can go back to that step if something happens. That's what you choose for that case. For scenario number 3, you pick this one. And this one says it's only gonna save the training state after an epoch is completed. So once the epoch is completed, then it is going to save the information about the training state. So that's scenario number 3. The person in the video request was talking about this one. So I'm going to select this one and I'm going to then save this. And let's highlight something here also. We're not going to specify any path here to a last state folder because we're not going to resume. This is the first time that we're doing it, right? So that's all that we need. We need to check this box to generate that file. This is going to probably take a little bit of time because I have a lot of steps going on. So with my graphics card, this training is going to probably take about an hour and 20, an hour and 30 minutes. So let me just start it. And I am going to pause the video waiting for this to get completed. And then I'll come back once we're done with the first training session. We can see the results of that first training session. And then how we resume from there. So let me go to my sample folder here and let's see if this starts training so we can see what we get. Let's give it a little bit of time to do all the calculation and all that stuff. And you see that we're going to get about 19 epochs with this training. And it's a total of 1,100 optimization steps. And the repeats and the images comes to 660. Remember, I had very few images, so I had to give it a lot of repeats. And if you see here, unit, the type, it's bfloat16, so it's using BF16 for my case and all of that. So you can see it's going to be about an hour and a half for it to do this training. I'm going to stop it here. I'm going to come back when that is done. All right, and we're back after a little bit over an hour and a half. Here's what we have from all the epochs on the first training session. As we saw before, sometimes we get some similar results to what we want. Most of the time it's not enough. I would say this is the closest thing that we got to what we want, but it still needs more training. So now let's go back to the model folder. And here we finally see what we wanted to see. For each one of these epochs that it created a folder. The last one here that has the name of the LoRA and state without a number, that's the last one that it generates, and this is where we would like to continue training from. Let's go into this folder really quickly and see what we have. So it has the checkpoint, basically like the epoch saved as model.savetensors. It has the train state file here, and it has a bunch of other stuff here that is relevant to this specific state. So this is what we're going to be using to resume the training. So now we have that. Let's get ready to use it. So the first thing we're going to be doing, we're going to go back here into Kohya and we're going to go into the model. And again, since I'm going to do a second session of training, I'm going to put a -2 here in the model output. That's going to be so that it doesn't complain about the files already existing. and it also helps us to identify that this is, the actual second session of training. I don't need to change anything else here in my case, so that's good. I'm going to save this, and then the next thing we're going to be doing is we're going to go into our parameters, and in the basic parameters, remember on the previous one we picked the LoRa that we wanted, and that was it. So in this case it's a little bit different. We're going to go here into looking for the network weights, and that's going to bring us here. And in the model folder, we're going to have all those folders that I mentioned. I'm going to look for the last epoch folder. So it's going to be this one. And then this is what we're going to be selecting here. We're going to select the model.save tensors file because we want to give it the save tensor file that has the network weights. But that is not going to be enough. Let's save this for now. And we need to give it more stuff. So let's close this. And let's go into the advanced settings. We're going to scroll pretty far down to where we were before. Make sure that we keep the save training state in there. And in here is where we're going to be doing our magic. It says resume from saved training state. So we need to give it the path to the folder of that state that we want to use. So we're going to give it the same path to that folder that contains that model that we just gave it at the very top, that save tensor file. So we're going to click here. We are going to be looking here in our folders, and we're going to get the same folder here that has the last one, and we're going to select that folder. So it's going to point to that folder that has that file that I gave on the very top, and we keep this checked. And there's nothing else that we want to be doing here. That should be enough. So we can just now close the advanced, close the parameters, save all of this. And now we should be able to continue training our LoRa past the last epoch that we got on the first attempt. So now let's start that training, and I'm going to be back again when we are done, because this is going to take another good amount of time, probably another hour and a half because of my settings, and then we'll see the results of that. But the important thing here, I want to see when it's loading everything to start the training session. I want to see that it is recognizing the previous training, and then it's going to continue from where we were. So let's give it a little bit of time here. It is loading the network weights, so you can see it loaded the model save tensors file. That's important. And then we had a problem. Actually, do not despair. That will probably be your reaction when you see a stack trace and something that says training has ended, but this can sometimes happen. It is telling us that it loaded the weights, it loaded the optimizers, it loaded the scheduler, it loaded the data loader sampler. So all of those things were loaded properly. It just could not load the random states file. And what is the random states file? Alright, if we go into here and we go into that folder, you see something that says random underscore states underscore 0.pkl. And this is a file that holds the PyTorch RNG state files for reproducibility, but sometimes it might just crash like it happened with us, where for some reason it just wouldn't read this file. But the thing here is that this file is actually not necessary. This is supposed to help by guaranteeing a bit for bit reproducibility of the training, but they are actually not required because, for example, you could get that error with a bunch of different things. For example, if it determines that the PyTorch version is different from the previous training, or the GPU count is different from the previous version, or if the driver changes or things like that. So don't worry, the solution that we have here when we see this error is we can just go here, get this random states file, delete it, we don't need it, and then we should be able to go ahead and restart the training, and it should not complain anymore. Let us go here, let's start the training again, and let's see now if it continues or if it decides to fail again. We only have very few images, so again, while we're waiting for this to go ahead, I highly recommend you to always have more images. Like, in my opinion, for anime about 75, and for real people about 150. Alright, this is another thing that I want to highlight. Even though I deleted the random states file, I try to run it again and it is failing. Why could that be? Well, if we're using an older version of Kohya SS, like in my case I have 2505, you might be stuck with a version of the code that still required random states to be present. That could be the reason that you can't do that, so then you need to update Kohya. Alright, so I was doing the update and I want to highlight a few things here regarding the update. So I went into the folder that has my Kohya instance and I did a git pull to pull the latest version of the update, but it said that I had changes into my requirements.txt file, which I don't remember making, but let's assume that that's true. So it said I needed to get rid of those changes before I could pull the new version of the repo. So I ran the checkout -- requirements text so that it would replace the requirements with the one from the repository, and then I did the git pull. Once I did the git pull, it was able to pull the latest version of Kohya, so that was important. I already got that here. Now when I tried to run that new version of Kohya, I found this problem here, which is that it told me that I have some missing dependencies. So in this case is the Pi CPU info. Apparently that was not in my packages. So what I did is I installed the Pi CPU info with the command pip install Pi CPU info, and then after that I did a pip install requirements again to make sure that I have all the requirements for this, and then it pulled everything down. And once I had all of this down, I could just go back to where I have my bat file that starts the application and trigger it, and then it was able to run the application. The application is back up again. I have now come to the application again, and I have loaded the configuration file that I saved. It has all the changes. For example, here's the -2 because it's the second try, and I go into the parameters here and I check that it is pointing to the right place here. And if we go into the advanced settings all the way down here, I see checked and I see the folder of where my last epoch state is. So we should be good now to then go and restart the training and see if we get any errors now. So let's start that training, wait a little bit for it to load and do its thing, and we'll see if now, ignoring that random states file, it can then continue the training. Let's give it a little bit of time here. It's loading everything, caching the latents, and it looks like we're going good now. All models loaded. Optimizer, it says could not load the random states, but that didn't stop us. We're continuing our training, so our training from the steps folder that we have is going ahead. All right, we got another stack trace, a traceback, but this is important. This is part of understanding how this works. If we read this carefully, we'll see something here that says assertion error. Max training steps should be greater than the initial step. Max train steps, and then it gives us that the value is 1100 versus 1100. So it's saying I've already reached the end of the training that you told me that I can do for this, because this is a calculation based on the amount of epochs that we have, the amount of images that we have in our data set, and the amount of repeats that we have, and all of that. How can we continue training if we've already reached the maximum? Well, there's several ways, but since I'm using the epochs for this, we can just increase the amount of epochs here. So let's say that I want to train now for 30 epochs instead of 20, which was the original training that I did. So let me save that, and then we should be able to now try it again and see how it behaves. Alright, it has continued here. I'm sorry, I needed to press enter to see it, but it's going ahead. And now you can see that says epoch is 30, so the maximum train steps jumped to 1650. So that means that now it's going to say, okay, I still have training to do because you want 30 epochs and we only had 20. So in that case, it's going to go ahead with those extra steps that are missing, which is 550 steps, which will create us the other 10 extra epochs. So let's wait until it starts actually working, and then here we go. We'll just wait for it to do its thing, and then we'll be back when that training is done. Alright, the training has completed, and as you can see, the new images start here with the -2, and it continued creating different epochs and testing those. And as you can see, the character is actually pretty good. It has improved a lot. There's just the proper dress hasn't developed yet, except on this one. This one, the dress is fine, but the face is different. So I mean, we can obviously tweak it with the prompt. This is just a sample of what it can generate, but the main things that I wanted to see here, which is on the face of the character, are there. And as you can see, it can continue. It was able to continue the training from where we were. So if we go back here into the models, we now have the same. We have state files also for that second run that we had. We're good. We can always continue training where we left off if we think that it is appropriate, that we need to do more training. So I'm gonna do a quick summary here of the things that I have covered. Number one, for better results, make your data set bigger. Get as many good pictures as you can. You saw how difficult it is with so few pictures to get a decent output out of the training. You have to train it a lot and repeat the images a lot. That takes a lot of time. It's not really efficient. So try to get as many images as you can. In my opinion, it should be around 75 images for anime and about 150 for people to get like really good characters and you know, make it look like what you want, if you want it to be like realistic, really close to what you want. If you don't care about that too much, if you want it to be more flexible, you just want to have like an underlying idea of the character and then you know, getting differences, then you know, using less images might be okay. Then we covered how to train two ways. We covered by just feeding it the save tensor file, meaning the epoch file, and then it's gonna do the training from there, starting basically from scratch, from all the information that it can get from that specific file. And the other way is how to enable the state folders so that we can get this train state JSON file and our model save tensors file that we can then make a reference to in our advanced parameters to continue the training from there. And remember, you have two options to do that. In your advanced parameters, you go here and you have a checkbox for save training stage, which saves immediately on every step. So if something happens and your training gets stopped, you can resume from that specific step that you were in. And the other one that is at the end of the training is only gonna save when you're done training. So it's gonna give you one folder. And that's it. That's what I wanted to cover here. I hope you find it useful and that answers your question. And also along the way, we covered a little bit of, you know, what happens if we have an older version of Kohya. Now we were able to update Kohya, so now I have 25:1, and that also solved the problem when I don't need the random file that we deleted. So when we're updating, we might face an issue like it happened in my case, where, you know, a dependency is missing. We just install that dependency, make sure that the requirements are met, and then the application should work fine. So I hope this covers everything that you might need to be able to continue previous trainings that you have done in Kohya SS. If you liked the video, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel if you have not done so. That's very important, it helps us grow. Hit the bell so you get notified whenever I upload a video. And leave me comments in the comment section below, because videos like this one are things that I create because of the comments that you put in the videos. Things that I know that you care about, that you want to see, that you would like help with. I try to help you out in the comment section also, so just know that. And you should have noticed that there was no ad on my video. That is on purpose. I'm not monetizing the channel, but that means that the effort that I spend into creating these videos gives me no return, zero money. So if you like the content, you found it useful, and you want to support me, there's a link in the description below where you can donate with PayPal, and there's also a Bitcoin wallet address if you prefer to donate that way. So that's gonna be it for this one. I'll see you in the next one. Take care.